still made the impression in my own, mental capacity, in my mind, that connected the two.
Which would suggest then that time is not linear.
Yes.
And no one who, none of the physicists who are really doing, real work with this believe that time is linear. And thousands of years ago, the Tibetans taught that time is not linear. So it could be that at that moment, we jumped forward, we jumped back. How would we know? If it's as simple as, I have watched people have a horrible experience or see something they didn't want to see. 5 minutes later, they edited it and they completely forgot that they saw it. And I know the human mind can do this from hypnosis. You can make someone forget that you can walk up to someone and make them forget they've ever met you 5 minutes later. You can trick them. And then, so the human mind does this. What was that?
I said, that's always great for parties.
It is. It really is. So I think divination or deja vu might be some combination of any of those. And then as dreams, I'm not certain what she's asking.
The way she explains it is, how do you deal with the dreams or deja vu, when they enter a reading, which I'm not quite sure I understand myself, unless you're having dreams or deja vu while you're doing the reading and it ties in.
I will say this about dream interpretation. I always say I don't buy those books. You know what I mean? That says these symbols mean these things, because your subconscious language and your subconscious symbolism is something that you build up very specifically. And I had this, I had a client recently that I did this experiment with. I asked her what a ring meant to her, which is so what does ring mean to you? And it was a very, that's a very simple, straightforward Lenormand image, the ring. And she says, it means the phone's going off and I'm not going to be alone because someone's going to talk to me. So ring meant an auditory thing to her. And to someone else, it might mean a contract. To someone else, it might mean a piece of jewelry. To someone else, it might be something very painful because they're going through a divorce. So at different times, whatever comes out in your subconscious, that's something that's very, very specific to you. And you have to ask yourself a couple of questions when you're interpreting your dreams, like, how did I feel in the dream? What does this symbol mean to me? What was the overall sensation by the time I was finished with the dream? Was it satisfactory? Was it not satisfactory? Does it seem like my subconscious is trying to talk to me, or was there a more premonitory kind of feel to it? So dreams are tricky, and I think that we do a disservice when we try to codify them. Those people who try to codify the books, and Freud had all that Freud new historical criticism that was in the literature courses and Freudian interpretation. They do that stuff all the time in the stories, and they try to codify that. Well, this is what it means. It's just a nightmare, because it could be as simple as you see a ring in your dream and it's telling you, either you've made a contract with yourself that you're not aware of, or you're about to break a contract, or maybe that someone's going to call you. It could mean a lot of things. So the best thing I would say is sit down and say, well, how did you feel when you had that ring in your hand in the dream? What were you wearing? Which way were you facing? What did you notice about it? What took your attention?
And I think you bring up an important thing. I think too often people want to seek out an answer from somebody that's quick, rather than to take the time to actually delve into their own mind and ask those particular questions about what it actually means for them. Because everybody is different, we grow up different. We have different parents. We live in different cultures. So what means one thing to us, may have several different meanings for somebody else. And I think that people need to take the time to look at those.
Absolutely. We
have another question in chat too.
Sure. Go ahead.
Not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It looks like Mahati, Maja. She says she's having trouble with confidence when choosing cards with tarot, and wants to know if there's a trick to shuffling and being certain that you choose the right cards.
This is something this is funny because I had never considered this. Actually, maybe that's not true. Maybe I did consider this. I would experiment and prove it to yourself. Because someone actually asked me this question a couple of months ago, and they said, how do you know when you've finished shuffling the Lenormand cards and you've shuffled them enough? I remember when I first started reading for people, maybe this story will help. I, for some reason, believed that there was no way you could shuffle the cards and they would all end up in a row and tell you everything you needed one after the other. So I was convinced you had to go through and pull them out of different parts of the deck, and then you would pull the right one. One night, I was at an event that I was doing that I had so many people, I didn't have the time to keep doing that. I had to shuffle and just start throwing them out, and I realized that it was just as accurate either way.
And I agree with that.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I said I agree with that. I do the same thing myself. You try a lot of different things, until you find what works for you particularly. And whether it's spreading them out, pulling, from different areas or dealing off the top, you're still divining on whatever the subject or the question is, and whatever cards land still are going to be valid as long as you're interpreting them.
Let me ask you a question then, and then maybe that helps them. Do you get a feeling when it's right? Do you get a sensation or a feeling when it's right?
I think internally I get either a sensation or I get one of my spirit guides that I work with saying, okay, stop.
Okay, so is it a voice always, or is it sometimes a sensation?
Sometimes it's either or. I deal with a lot of spirit when I do readings, so for me, a lot of times it is auditory. But other times I just have this innate sensation that, okay, I'm done. And you have to really listen, and pay attention to your own inner, I'll call it bells and whistles. Things that always tell us, hold on, don't move, don't go forward, put your brakes on, all those little things that sometimes we don't always pay attention to because we're stuck in the moment. And, you have to relax. And I hate to say empty your mind, but in a way you have to clear away all thoughts other than what you're focusing on so you can listen.
So when you get that sensation, when it's not a sound, when it's not auditory, which I understand, where is that sensation? Where you said it's internal, where in your body is it?
For me, it's in my heart.
So it's in your heart. So What does it feel like?
For me, a lot of times it's either warm or it almost feels like a fluttering.
So there's a definite feeling, a definite sensation that you can feel specifically, and for you it's in your heart. And I know specifically that there are people who read from their stomach, they read from their heart, some people read from their groin, some people read from their throat, some people read from their eye, and it depends on the person. Some people just get an overall sense. This is right. So Maya, my recommendation for you is that you be aware of what sensations you have when you're doing it, and see if there's one that gives you the trigger that says, yeah, this is it. So, for example, think about a time in your life where you know or you knew that something was right. And when you think back in that moment when you knew it was right and it turned out right, because everyone's had that experience where you just knew something and it turned out right. Think about that, go back to that moment and be aware of what was going on inside your body at that time, if there was some sensation. And that sensation, be very aware of it. Take a nice deep breath in, be aware of it, and then be aware that that's your internal compass. And that when it goes off, it's telling you this is the time.
And it is different for every person.
It is, but there will be something. Just like you said, Michael, you had that moment. It was in your heart, and you had that warmth. So now you're going to know whenever you're doing something in your life, and you don't have that warmth or you don't have that fluttering, you're going against that internal compass, and that's when you don't need the cards. And that's a lot of time what people are trying to. They're always asking, how do you do it without cards? Because you don't have to use cards, and in a lot of cases, and this one always gets people freaked out when I say this, but there's a being in the deck. And some people, the people who are really good, know how to hear that. They know how to hear that being in the deck. Each deck has a being attached to it. And there's a legend about how that happened. But that being will talk to you, and you can hear it. And some people are real good at hearing it. And some people will feel that sensation that connects to that. And then others they'll just get a feeling and they'll just know what to say. But the mind is a very, very powerful thing. And I'm not saying that there isn't any spirits out there, because there sure are. But different people interact in different ways, and different people interact with different kinds of spirits, and the relationship and the contract that they make with that spirit is different. Some people make a contract that they want to be helpful. Some people make a contract that they want to be fed on. And you'll notice that, because they'll get fed on in their life and all their relationships. They'll be in relationships that are horrible and they're being fed on. They'll have spiritual relationships with beings that feed on them as well. And some people want power. Some people want clarity. Some people want understanding. Some people want popularity. And they'll get that connection, and each one has a different way that they connect with whatever spirit or being or is they're working with. And but that internal compass, if you can get that internal compass going when you're shuffling, that internal compass goes. If you know what that feels like that time in your life where you felt like you were real certain, and you go in and you go, okay, what did I feel? What am I aware of in my body that I felt? And you're like, oh, I had this really strong, warm feeling in my stomach. And then you'll know next time you get that warm, strong feeling in your stomach, it's your compass telling you, okay, this is it. And play with it, experiment with it, and you'll figure it out. It is really anyone who becomes really good at this stuff, really at some point, and this is where I exasperated my master years ago in a lot of ways. I was trying to get him to tell me the answer, and he wouldn't. And so finally I ended up apologizing to him. I'm like, my God, you were trying to make me stand on my own. And he's like, yes. So the best you can do is you can say, okay, this is what's worked for, maybe this is what's worked for you, Michael. This is what's worked for me. This is what worked for someone else. But in the end, you got to try it and see which one will work for you. And the biggest problem I think people having with divination is trusting themselves.
Yes.
Because we've been alienated from that. It's the two of spades. There is an enemy that has been placed in our head from the time we are children, and that enemy is ourselves. From the time we are children, we have been alienated from our own special gifts and told to not trust them. And we have been told that whatever our natural set of gifts is should be set aside, and instead we should want to go out and make gold for our master, bring it to him, and let him put our lights on, and let him decide what's good for us, and let him decide what we need to learn. Meanwhile, there's this part of us inside that says, this is not why I'm here. This is not what my gifts are. This is not who I am. But then we're immediately told by everyone around us, nope, this is the way the world works. Don't trust yourself.
And trust is a huge thing when it comes to your own relationship with whatever divinatory means you want to use. but more so with your own self. You know,